Here, and we've got a lot of information to go over today, but it's been compiled into a draft report, and once we get your approval as a task force today, we'll be in a position to circulate that and make it public and provide it to the legislature, and y'all can take it from there. So with that, I want to thank you all for serving. We do have a little business to tend to before we get underway with the going over the report, but we have a couple sets of minutes here that we need to get approved. We have a September 25th meeting. That was when we met here before. You see those minutes before you, and also we had a teleconference that was noticed for November 18th, and those minutes are there before you as well. Any edits, changes, discussion on that? See anything? If not, I entertain a motion to be approved. And second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. That's for both those sets of minutes, and they're approved. Now, did everybody get a copy of the draft final report to the Mississippi Legislature?
No, I didn't.
Would anybody like it? I'm referring here to the task force, members of the task force. You will have a chance, the public will have a chance to request a copy of this in just a little while, but all the task force members get a copy of the draft report that you have. Okay. It's 100 and something pages long, but most of that, a lot of that is appendices that are to the back of the report. The report itself is about 35 pages long. And a lot of this is information that we've already gone over. We've plowed a lot of ground here in the Mississippi Hemp Cultivation Task Force. We've covered a lot of issues, and a lot of this information in the report is already been discussed. Everyone has a copy. I refer you to the first page of that draft report, and it is simply an executive summary. As you look at that, I will just read a portion of this executive summary, and I want you all to look over that. It goes through the background of the 2014 Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill. It refers to the current status of Mississippi law. As of today, hemp is still classified as a Schedule I controlled substance in the state of Mississippi. So with that said, there are a few products that are exempt. They're listed here. And then we go into the federal farm bill. I sure will. Hold that thought. Dr. Walker, are you joining us by phone? Thank you. Okay, can you hear what I'm saying? Okay, great. So Dr. Larry Walker with the University of Mississippi Natural Products Research Division. We'll go through a summary of the federal law as it was changed. And then, since the last time we met, we point out that the United States Department of Agriculture has recently promulgated its rules, its proposed federal rules, by which it will approve a state plan for the domestic production of hemp. Those rules are attached as Appendix A to this draft report. Those rules are not yet final, but they're very, very lengthy, and they go into quite some detail about the things that the federal United States Department of Agriculture will require of every state, including the state of Mississippi, should the legislature decide to approve this. Some of those proposals include background checks for potential growers, GPS coordinates identifying the location of the proposed hemp crop, sampling and testing procedures for THC levels, disposal of non-compliant plants, and procedures for crop inspections. All those requirements are contained in the USDA interim final rules attached as Appendix A to this report. So we only got that October the 31st, I believe they were published. And they are subject now to comment, I think a 60-day comment period They are subject to change, but I think it's enough certainly to for this task force to finalize this report and get it before the legislature. I'm going to read you the last paragraph that I have proposed, we have proposed for inclusion in the legislature. The task force findings presented in this report indicate both the positive potential and the significant risks of hemp cultivation in the state of Mississippi. Clearly, the facts demonstrate the potential for commercial hemp production in Mississippi, as well as the potential for hemp processing. At the same time, there are risks inherent in the current and anticipated hemp markets due to current oversupply, lack of infrastructure, and supply chain. Additionally, there are significant law enforcement concerns noted in the Law Enforcement Committee report. And so the task force findings that we're proposing to present represent a balance of information designed to provide the legislature with the facts needed to craft meaningful legislation accomplishing the legislature's desired policies. That is the executive summary. There's on page 3 an introduction with some more detail about how we got here. The members of the committee are outlined. And then we have 4 committee reports. We have had presentations by these committees over the last few months. Most recently in September, the Law Enforcement Committee. We had the Economics, Marketing, and Job Creation Committee. There is a report contained from page 5 all the way through page 19. So there's about 14 pages of that. Economics, Marketing, and Job Creation Committee report, which goes into some detail not only about the potential, but actual existing industry, both inside and surrounding the state of Mississippi. And we will refer that to you to review. Take a few moments and review that. Anyone have anything to add on the task force regarding the Economics, Marketing, Jobs Creation Committee? I want to thank the chairman, co-chairman of that committee for providing this report. Would anyone else on the task force wish to add anything about what's in this committee report? Not seeing or hearing any, we'll move on to the Hemp Agronomy Committee report. But before we go, I do want to mention a couple of things. Back on the Economic and Job Creation Committee report. On page 16, it is noted that we have in Charleston, Mississippi, a company known as Kenbro. Kenbro, I actually visited their operations within the last 2 or 3 weeks. They are a canaf producer and fiber processor. And as a matter of fact, they have already been processing industrial hemp that is grown in other states at this location in Kenbro's facilities in Charleston, Mississippi. Brent Brazier is founder and president of that organization. He and I visited and he showed me his operation. So what's happening, in fact, right now, is hemp is being grown in Kentucky where they don't have a processor. They're shipping it to Charleston, Mississippi. It's being processed into fiber and then being shipped back to Kentucky. Isn't that interesting? I got a handful of that hemp at an undisclosed location, all right? I have a handful of it. I wanted to feed it. And it's very similar to its cousin, canaf, which is a fiber-absorbent type material. So, again, because it is not grown here, because it is a processed product, it falls within the current exceptions for processing, but you can't grow it in Mississippi as of right now. You can't cultivate it. I would also point out that El Sole Laboratories is a Mississippi private analytical service company that's done a lot of research on the anti-epileptic pharmaceutical applications of cannabis through the University of Mississippi Medical Center. And so I would just refer those bits of information to you on pages 16, 17, 18. Now moving to the Hemp Agronomy Committee report, and again, thank you to our chairman for producing this report as to actually how hemp could be cultivated and grown in Mississippi, and the risks and the opportunities for that. Does anyone have anything to add to that report, beginning on page 20 and going to page 29? Hemp agronomy. Anyone want to add anything or make any additional points before we move on? Okay, y'all are moving right along with this. Let's move then to the Law Enforcement Committee report, and that's on pages 29 through 30, 29 and 30, and this is a summary of the report that was presented at our last meeting, and a list of 7 questions that were asked that the legislature should consider in these issues from a law enforcement standpoint. Anything from the task force on this before we move on? Okay, well, we're going to get done early today. Let's move to the last committee report, beginning at page 31. And this is the new report. It is a report that is page 31, 32, and 33, and about half of page 34. This is the committee that this task force authorized to be sent to Kentucky, to Tennessee, to look at existing regulations and monitoring processes in these other states that have had pilot programs in place. And I'm not going to take time to read all this, but I'm going to give you some highlights of this report. I want you to review it as we walk through this. One of the big issues is that even though these other states have had pilot programs in place, there has been essentially a patchwork of regulations state by state as to how their plans work and what processes they use. Now, as of last month, USDA having issued its final rules, a lot of these states are having to go back and adjust their state plans to conform to the federal requirements. So I think it's worth noting that although Mississippi has been criticized by some for being late to this process, I think that's a false criticism, because the reality is we actually are going to be on the front end. If the legislature decides to move forward with this, we'll have exactly what the federal rules will require. We won't be having to recreate the wheel, and we'll have the experience of these other states that we'll mention here in this report. Other state regulators, other state departments of agriculture and commerce, I'll give you Kentucky as an example. Kentucky is the most advanced. In the state of Kentucky, they essentially had to create a new hemp production division of the Kentucky Department of Agriculture for inspectors and for testing of these crops. And they told us that they estimated in their first year that they had about $500,000 taxpayer dollars devoted to regulation and monitoring these hemp products. So cultivation and growing of hemp crop. So I just throw that out to you for information. I will point out that on page 31 of this report, if this is a crop that the legislature wants to authorize, there will be required necessary cooperation between the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce, our law enforcement community represented here on this task force, the Department of Health, of course our state chemical lab. And one interesting note is that the feds require that a state lab be a particular type of lab, and Mississippi's state chemical lab meets those tests. So we have that lab in place. I point that out for you. But all of us, the Department of Transportation is going to have to be at the table on this. You know, transportation, regardless of what the legislature does, the federal law under the interstate system is going to provide for the transportation of these products. So that's going to be an issue as well. The forensics laboratory, as I mentioned, the testing that is required. All these things are going to be required if the legislature approves this as a legalized crop in Mississippi. Then we, as the State Department of Agriculture and Commerce, will be required to develop a plan to address all these things and submit that plan to the United States Department of Agriculture for their approval. And we outline some of these things in this Regulation and Monitoring Committee report. For example, on page 32, these are some examples of things we know will have to happen because of what the USDA has mandated and based on the experiences of other states. We know that we'll have the Department of Agriculture and Commerce hemp application and licensing process, a field identification process. We will have through the Department of Health, of course, there could be cannabis products, safety issues, and inspections of those. The Department of Public Safety, hemp processor regulation and inspection. The Bureau of Narcotics would be tasked with checking grower and processor criminal background checks, crop and THC disposal and prosecution in the event of an illegal crop, a crop that goes hot for whatever reason. And then controlled substance regulation. The Mississippi Board of Animal Health is already, in fact, looking at issues in animal feed and product safety and regulation. We're already seeing in Mississippi feed being processed in other states that's coming here that is having CBD added to animal feed, these type of products. So that's something that's already happening. Department of Transportation, intrastate and interstate transportation issues so that we avoid confusion on that. The Attorney General's office will be tasked with legal guidance, interpretations, and possible prosecutions in the event of illegal activity. The State Chemical Lab would be tasked with the hemp testing and retesting to make sure this crop is below the 0.3% THC level. And then the feds, I would add, have put in place some guidelines as to one of the big questions that's been asked over the last few months is what happens if the crop pops hot? The farmer didn't do anything wrong. Is the farmer liable for that? The USDA actually puts in place some safeguards that a grower must take reasonable steps to mitigate that, and that would seem to absolve them of any legal liability on that point. But again, that's something that will have to be addressed in whatever legislation the legislature considers. Local and state law enforcement has issued in their report, the need for possible tests. The concern in other states has been for marijuana violations. Some of the defendants have taken the position that they thought it was hemp. So that's an added issue for law enforcement to work through. It may be raised as a defense. And of course, marijuana is still illegal under Mississippi's law. Banking is a big issue. This has been an issue in other states. Financing of these operations. Up until recently, there was very little guidelines from the federal government as to what would be legal. And so the banking community has been reluctant in a lot of cases to finance these operations. We think that will eventually unfold, it should, but just be aware that that's an issue. The research required, agronomy, both the Mississippi State Extension, Alcorn State Extension, recommendations helping growers, that's going to be a factor. The Board of Pharmacy, to the extent there is the further development of these pharmaceutical applications, they'll be involved to give guidance in that regard. And the forensics lab would be required to do testing for hemp and cannabis for law enforcement support to the extent that violation was determined. So all of that to say, it's a multi-agency situation if the legislature moves forward with this, and we would just ask that all these issues be considered. We're, as a Department of Agriculture, speaking only for our agency, your Department of Agriculture and Commerce, we're a very small agency. We have about 178 employees that are constantly doing all the things that we do right now, working with our growers, testing petroleum devices, weights and measures. We don't have a team of people right now that we can pull off of our existing farmer support and send into a hemp field. We would have to hire some people to do that. We would have to have some equipment to do some of the work that would be required. I know a lot of these other agencies I mentioned will also need to be funded for that purpose as well. Licensing fees in other states have not proven to be sufficient to cover the cost of these additional personnel and equipment needs. So that's just something the legislature needs to know about. We, in this report, put some minimum changes that must occur if the legislature decides to legalize industrial hemp. On page 33, there must be legislation that would legalize the cultivation of hemp and amend the Controlled Substance Act. There must be authority delegated to the Mississippi Department of Agriculture and Commerce to develop a state hemp cultivation plan. And then we list a series of statutes that would need to be addressed that we've identified under the criminal code that would need to be taken out of that code, and we put that there for you. And in conclusion, on page 34 and 35, first of all, does anybody have anything you want to add on the Regulations and Monitoring Committee report? Anything that I haven't mentioned that you want to mention as a task force? Going once, going twice. Go. All right. The creation of a hemp cultivation program in Mississippi, in conclusion, does present potential opportunities for a new alternative crop for farmers. But based on the research that's contained in this report, it probably would not represent a large economic boom for most growers in comparison to the yields and revenue of other crops. It will be important to manage our growers' economic expectations on the part of the farmers aspiring to grow hemp, since market stability is still developing and not yet known. We've attached comments of the public as Appendix B to this report, and a series of recent articles on market oversupply in other states and what other growers are experiencing. We felt the legislature should know this, so we attached public comments as well as the recent articles about hemp in other states as Appendix C. Additionally, there is a very limited current market and limited infrastructure and supply chain systems for this particular crop. It's still in the development phase. I think we can conclude that. But we want to pass this report to the legislature, pointing out that although Mississippi has taken a conservative approach about hemp cultivation, we think in the long run this will benefit farmers and residents of the state, since now we have the benefit of these other state experiences, along with the recently issued USDA rules. And just being totally honest, if the Mississippi legislature should elect to approve hemp cultivation in our state, developing a federally approved state cultivation plan will result in costs among a host of state agencies, as well as manpower requirements. And so we would encourage our legislators to put a pencil to that through the budget office and the experts that are able to put a pencil to it and come up with these anticipated costs. And we can help in that regard too. And so the last thing I will say as we wrap up here is The task force recommends that the Mississippi legislature consider the variety of the issues we have discussed in this report in developing potential legislation that would represent the policies of the state of Mississippi. And while we anticipate delivering this report to the legislature on December 2nd, 2019, the task force and its members stand ready to assist the legislature in crafting a bill to implement whatever policy decisions the legislature deems appropriate and to provide for the enforcement of these policies by the necessary agencies. Anything any of the task force members would like to add, say at this time? About to wrap it up. Anyone? Okay. Any of our other legislators that are here? I see some in the back, maybe others here. Members of the legislature, do you have anything you would like to add or a question about what I presented here in this report so far? I don't see any. All right, if there are members of the public here today, and we've had several requests of people to speak, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to accommodate all those requests. So members of the public, if you have comments that you would like to see included in this report, this is your chance today. You can leave them here with us, and we'll make sure they're added to the report and provided to the legislature, or you can email them to our MS Hemp Cultivation Task Force, or the email address, MS Hemp Task Force. Somebody get that for us. Email address, what is that email address? I think it's MS Hemp Task Force. Email those to us today, and we will get them in the report. Here it is. It's MS Hemp Task Force at mdac.ms.gov. MS Hemp Task Force at mdac.ms.gov. So I would just say send us wherever you would like to have included, and we will include that in our report.
Commissioner, that was too much too fast.
MS Hemp Task Force, all one word, at mdac.ms.gov. Send us that, and we'll make sure it's included as part of Appendix B in the report. We've tried to be very transparent with this process, and we feel like we have a report here that will provide the legislature with probably more than the legislature needs to make a decision. But we appreciate every one of your participation and your involvement, and we'll be around to answer any questions, concerns, or issues as we move forward through the process. I know that this is a new term for a new, not only a new governor, but a new lieutenant governor, and a new committee chairman of some, and it will be in place. So we'll have some time at the beginning of the session. I think our task force doesn't disband until July 1, 2020. So we'll be around if we need to consider anything else, or we can do that individually as you have requests or questions. So with that, I'm going to entertain a motion that we approve this report. In making this motion, I'm asking for authority to insert any additional comments that we receive from the public, and also to make any grammatical or technical changes that we need to make in the presentation of the report. Is there a motion to that? It's a motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Okay, well, I want to thank you, and that is voting on the final report. We will prepare that, and our intent is to have it in final form and deliver it here to the legislature. And we'll make sure everybody gets a copy by email and on their desk. We'll do that on December the 2nd. That's next Monday. Anything else from the task force? I hear a motion, this task force adjourned. All right, in a second. All in favor say aye. Thank y'all for participating. We'll see you soon.